Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you all are doing well. So, today we are going to discuss one of the most important topics in Indian legal history, that is administration of justice in Bombay. So, when we study the history of Indian judiciary, we often focus on the Supreme Court, High Courts or the modern legal system. लेकिन ये समझने के लिए कि ये इंस्टीट्यूशंस इवॉल्व कैसे हुए, we need to go back to the colonial period and examine how the British first experimented with the judicial administration in India. Bombay provides one of the best examples of this evolution. So let's get going. So, originally, Bombay was under the Portuguese control from 1534 onwards. The situation changed in 1661 when the Portuguese king transferred Bombay to Charles II of England as a part of marriage alliance. However, Charles too was not particularly interested in administering Bombay directly. So therefore, in 1668, Charles II leased it to the East India Company. Now this transfer created a new challenge for the company. The company was no longer merely a trading organization, it was now administrating territory, governing people, regulating commerce, and maintaining law and order. And as trade expanded and population increased, disputes relating to property, contracts, crime, and commercial transactions also increased. A growing settlement could not function without an organized system of justice. The development of judicial administration in Bombay therefore took place in three stages. They are Stage 1, which spans from 1668 to 1683, Stage 2, which spans from 1684 to 1690, and Stage 3, which spans from 1718 to 1726. Each stage reflects the company's attempt to solve practical problems of governance and commerce. So let's get started with Stage 1. So, as to understand the reforms introduced during this period, we must first appreciate the condition of Bombay in late 17th century. The East India Company had only recently acquired control of the settlement. Merchants from different backgrounds were arriving, commercial activities were increasing, and people belonging to different communities were living together. Now, in such circumstances, disputes were inevitable. Questions regarding ownership of property, commercial transactions, criminal offences, and public order required a structured legal response. The existing arrangements were inadequate for these growing demands. So, it was in this context that Gerald Ongier emerged as one of the most important figures in the legal history of Bombay. Now, rather than viewing law merely as a mechanism for punishment, Ongar understood that a reliable judicial system was essential for economic growth. Merchants would only conduct business confidently if they believed that disputes could be resolved fairly and predictably. So, with this objective, he undertook a major reorganization of the judicial system in 1670. So, one of the Ongier's first step was to classify laws into six broad categories. At first glance, this may appear to be a simple administrative measure. However, in reality, it represented an attempt to bring order and clarity into developing legal system. So, the first category dealt with freedom of worship and religious beliefs. This was particularly important because Bombay's population was culturally and religiously diverse. Maintaining harmony among different communities was essential for social stability. The second category focused on impartial administration of justice. This reflected the company's desire to establish confidence in its legal institutions. People were expected to believe that disputes would be decided according to established principles rather than personal preferences. The third category dealt with criminal justice and provided for the establishment of a court of judicature. It also included provisions relating to the maintenance of peace and arrest of offenders. Fourth category dealt with registration of transactions involving land and houses. So, as commerce expanded, property acquired increasing economic value. Now, proper registration helped reduce disputes regarding ownership and transfer. The fifth category contained miscellaneous provisions and penalty for different offences. Finally, the sixth category addressed military discipline and prevention of disorder or revolt. Since the company's authority ultimately depended upon maintaining effective control over its settlement, military discipline remained a crucial concern. So, taken together, these reforms demonstrate that Ongir was attempting to create not merely courts but an entire comprehensive legal framework capable of governing a growing commercial town. Let's go ahead. Now, of course, creating laws alone was not sufficient. Those laws required institutions for their enforcement. So, to address this need, Bombay was divided into two divisions, and each division was provided with its own court. Each court consisted of 5 judges and was presided over by the customs officer of the division, who was generally an Englishman. The courts were not intended to decide major disputes. Instead, they functioned as local courts dealing with relatively minor civil and criminal matters. A minimum of 3 judges constituted the quorum, ensuring that decisions were not made by single individual. The courts met once every week and exercised jurisdiction over cases involving amounts up to 2 xenophins, a Portuguese coin roughly equivalent to 7.5 rupee. This limitation reveals the purpose of these courts. They were designed to provide quick resolution of everyday disputes at the local level, thereby preventing minor disagreements from escalating into larger conflicts. New Judicial Plan of 1672. So now, although the divisional courts improved local administration, the company soon realized that a more centralized judicial institution was necessary. So this led to the new Judicial Plan of 1672. One of the most significant features of this plan was the decision that all cases would be tried according to the English law. Now, this marked an important stage in the gradual introduction of English legal principles into Bombay's administration. This plan also established Central Court of Judicature. Now, unlike the divisional courts, this institution exercised wider jurisdiction. It was presided over by a single judge and met once every week. The Court of Judicature heard civil cases, criminal cases, and testamentary matters, meaning disputes concerning wills, inheritance, and succession. The creation of this court reflected the company's desire to establish a central authority capable of dealing with more complex legal issues. Justice of peace. So, the new judicial plan also introduced another important institution, the Justice of Peace. Bombay was divided into 4 divisions, each headed by an English officer known as the Justice of Peace. These officials performed functions similar to those of modern magistrates. When an offense occurred, the Justice of Peace conducted preliminary proceedings, recorded relevant information, and forwarded the accused person to the Court of Judicature for trial. In this way, they acted as an important link between law enforcement and judicial process. Appeals from the Court of Judicature could be made to the Deputy Governor and Council, which functioned as the highest appellate authority during this period. Court of Conscience. An especially interesting feature of Ongir's reforms was the establishment of this Court of Conscience. The purpose of this court was practical and humanitarian. Now, not every dispute involved substantial amounts of money, and many individuals could not afford expensive litigation. So, the Court of Consigne therefore dealt with petty disputes in summary manner and it did so without charging fees from litigants. So this made justice more accessible and reduced the burden on higher courts. Although simple in structure, the Court of Conscience represented an early effort to ensure that even ordinary people could obtain legal remedies without excessive expense. So when we look at stage 1 as a whole, its importance becomes clear. So this period witnessed the first serious attempt to establish an organized judicial system in Bombay. Through Gerald Aungier's reforms, laws were classified, courts were established, English legal principles were introduced, and mechanisms were created to deal with both major and minor disputes. Most importantly, the foundation of judicial administration were laid, creating the framework upon which the later reforms would build. Moving ahead, so stage 2, which spans from 1684 to 1690. So, to understand stage 2, we must first appreciate that judicial institutions are not self sustaining. Creating courts is one thing, however, ensuring that they continue to function effectively is another. The judicial system established by Gerald Ongier had provided Bombay with a degree of administrative stability. However, much of this system depended upon capable leadership. After Ongier's death, the strength of judicial structure gradually weakened. This situation became even more unstable due to the Kigwins Rebellion of 1683. Now, although the rebellion was a primarily political and administrative conflict, its consequences extended far beyond politics. Any disturbance affecting governmental authority inevitably affects the administration of justice as well. Courts can function effectively only when there is a stable political environment supporting them. So, as Bombay entered this period of uncertainty, the East India Company recognized the need for fresh judicial arrangements capable of meeting the changing requirements of an expanding commercial settlement. At the same time, Bombay was becoming increasingly important as a maritime trading center. Its location made it an ideal port for commerce as we all know that Bombay is a port city. So ships carrying merchants, goods and commercial investments regularly entered and left Bombay's harbour. As maritime activity expanded, disputes relating to shipping, cargo, commercial agreements, and navigation became more common. The existing codes were not specifically designed to handle such matters. So, recognizing this need, the Charter of 1683 authorized the East India Company to establish Admiralty courts. Acting under this authority, the company established the Court of Admiralty in Bombay in 1684. This institution was modelled upon the Admiralty Court already functioning in Madras. This development is significant because it reflects the growing complexity of Bombay's economy. As commerce became more sophisticated, the legal system also had to evolve in order to deal with new categories of dispute. One of the most important features of Admiralty Court was the appointment of Dr. St. John as its first judge advocate. Today, the idea of a legally trained judge appears completely normal. However, during the 17th century, many judicial officers were administrators rather than professional lawyers. For this reason, the appointment of Dr. St. John represented a major development. He was a learned civilian with legal training and expertise. His appointment marked one of the earliest attempts to introduce professionally trained legal personnel into the administration of justice in India. This reflects an important shift in judicial thinking. At the same time, Bombay faced broader administrative difficulties. External pressure from the Mughal Empire further complicated the company's position, and by 1690, these combined difficulties contributed to the decline of the judicial system. and as a result, judicial functions once again came to be exercised directly by the governor and council. This development effectively represented a step backward. Instead of independent judicial institutions, authority once more became concentrated in the administrative hands. Now, stage 2 is particularly important because it demonstrates both the possibilities and limitations of early colonial judicial administration. On the one hand, we see the establishment of the Admiralty Court introduced specialized jurisdiction and professional legal advice. However, on the other hand, we see conflicts regarding judicial independence and administrative instability, revealing how fragile these institutions remained. The period therefore serve as an important reminder that effectiveness of judicial system depends not only upon courts and judges but also upon political stability and respect for judicial autonomy. So अब आता है स्टेज 3. जैसे जब एडमिरल्टी कोर्ट का डिक्लाइन हुआ उसके बाद बॉम्बे एंटर्ड अ प्रोलॉन्ग पीरियड ऑफ जुडिशियल अनसर्टेनिटी. For nearly 28 years, there was no effective judicial institution comparable to those established during the earlier phases. और इस एब्सेंस के चलते बहुत सारे सिग्निफिकेंट चैलेंजेस क्रिएट हुए. जो कमर्शियल कम्युनिटीज होती हैं उन्हें कॉन्फिडेंस चाहिए होता है लीगल इंस्टीट्यूशंस में. मर्चेंट्स जो है वो मनी इन्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं, कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स में एंटर कर रहे हैं, ट्रेड कर रहे हैं आपस में, तो वो सिर्फ तभी कॉन्फिडेंटली तभी इस सब बिजनेस में वो होंगे, एंगेज होंगे जब उन्हें लगेगा कि अगर कोई डिस्प्यूट अराइज होता है वो फेयरली और प्रेडिक्टिवली सॉल्व हो जाएगा. So without an effective judicial system, commercial confidence inevitably suffers. So East India Company therefore recognized कि necessity है एक of restoring a structured system of justice. So this led to one of the most important judicial development in Bombay before the Charter of 1726. So now on 25 March 1718, Court of Judicature was established. The creation of this court represented an act of restoring order, stability, and public confidence in the administration of justice. Its composition it was particularly noteworthy. So now the court consisted of a chief justice and other 9 judges. So unlike many other institutions, the court included representatives from Bombay's principal communities, including Hindus, Muslims, Portuguese, Christians, and Parsis. This was significant development because Bombay was a culturally diverse settlement, including representatives from different communities, helped ensure that the judicial system reflected the social realities of the population it governed. Now, 3 English judges constituted the quorum of the court. इसका मतलब ये है कि एटलीस्ट 3 जजेस को तो प्रेजेंट होना ही था फॉर कैरिंग ऑन द प्रोसीडिंग्स. एटलीस्ट 3 है ये. Next is the jurisdiction. So the re-established court of judicature possessed extensive authority. It exercised civil jurisdiction, criminal, probate jurisdiction, and various administrative jurisdiction, and administered justice according to the company's regulations and local customs. So in practical terms, this meant the court dealt with almost every important category of dispute arising within the settlement. Another notable feature was the basis upon which justice was administered. This approach reflected the realities of colonial government. Now the company could not simply ignore the existing social and cultural practice. Effective administration required a balance between company's regulation and local customs. Alright. The court, we can say, therefore functioned as a hybrid institution combining elements of English administration with local customary practices. Going ahead. So the establishment of the Court of Judicature obviously produced important results. It significantly restored judicial stability, and for merchants and traders, the existence of a functioning of a judicial system created a confidence that commercial disputes could be resolved through legal processes rather than personal influence or force. So, as confidence increased, Bombay's position as a commercial center strengthened further. The court, therefore, we can say, contributed not only to legal administration but also to some extent economic development as well. But despite these achievements, the court was far from perfect. Alright, one of the most famous examples illustrating its weakness is the Rama case. So, in this case, a man named Rama was wrongfully convicted, sentenced to life imprisonment, and had all his property confiscated. It was only after his death that his innocence was established. This incident shocked many observers because it exposed the fundamental weaknesses within the judicial system. The problem was not merely an error in judgment. The case highlighted deeper structural issues, including absence of clearly codified laws and reliable procedural safeguards. Without clear legal rules and standardized procedures, judicial decisions could become inconsistent and occasionally, we can say, unjust as well. The Rama case, therefore, became a powerful example of the dangers associated with an underdeveloped legal system and made the need for reform even more urgent. Now, moving to the Charter of 1726. So, the weaknesses revealed by cases such as the Ramas convinced many administrators that further reform was necessary. The, the company increasingly recognized that Bombay required a more systematic and formal judicial framework. So, this realization eventually led to one of the most significant milestones in the history of colonial law, the Charter of 1726. So, the charter established mayor's court in the presidency towns and introduced a more formal English judicial system. For Bombay, this represented the beginning of new phase in judicial administration. The Court of Judicature established in 1718 was ultimately replaced by the mayor's court created under the charter. Now, coming to the significance of Stage 3, we can say that Stage 3 occupies a special place in the legal history of Bombay. It restored judicial stability after decades of uncertainty, expanded the scope of judicial administration, and strengthened commercial confidence. However, on the same hand, cases such as the Ramas demonstrated that stability alone it was not enough. A truly effective legal system would require clear laws, proper procedures, and institutional safeguards. The reforms introduced through Charter of 1626 were therefore not sudden innovations. We can say they were the culmination of decades of experimentation, success, failure, and learnings within the Bombay's judicial administration. So that was it for this topic. I really hope you understood this topic well. If you have any doubts, you can comment down and I'll try to solve them. Please like this video, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll meet you in the next video.